There is a single, shocking conjunction in the Gospel of John that completely rewrites how we understand God's delays, yet almost every modern reader skips right over it. If you have been staring at a dead dream, looking at the shattered pieces of a prayer that seemingly went unanswered, wondering why the God who deeply loves you hasn't shown up to fix it, this overlooked grammatical pivot will change how you survive the agony of the waiting room. The midday sun was beating down relentlessly on the crowded, suffocating streets of Capernaum as a desperate father watched his absolute last hope stop dead in his tracks. Jairus had done everything right. He had pushed through the aggressive, murmuring mob, abandoned his dignity as a synagogue leader, fallen flat into the dust at the feet of the controversial teacher, and begged him to come heal his 12-year-old daughter who was actively dying at home. And Jesus had agreed. They were on their way. The rescue was finally in motion. You can imagine the frantic, fragile hope blooming in Jairus' chest. But then, Jesus stopped. He stopped the entire procession to find a woman who had merely touched the hem of his cloak. Every single second Jesus spent speaking to this woman, looking into her eyes, calling her daughter, was an agonizing second. Jairus' actual daughter was bleeding out in a dark room down the street. You can almost feel the cold panic rising in Jairus' throat. The unbearable, dizzying agony of watching God prioritize someone else's miracle while his own world collapsed into ruin. And then, cutting through the noise of the crowd, the messenger arrived with the words Jairus feared most, telling him his daughter was dead and not to trouble the teacher any further. Maybe you have felt exactly what Jairus felt standing in that dusty street. The crushing, suffocating realization that God was simply too late. You did the right things, you prayed the right prayers, you believed with all your heart, but the clock ran out anyway. You are staring at a situation that has passed the point of no return, and the silence from heaven feels absolutely deafening. We see this exact same agonizing timeline of delayed hope play out in the little village of Bethany. The sisters Mary and Martha are watching their beloved brother Lazarus rapidly fade away. They know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesus can heal him. They have watched him heal total strangers, open the eyes of the blind, and cleanse lepers, so surely, without question, he will drop everything and rush to the bedside of one of his closest friends. They send a desperate, urgent, yet beautifully simple message, saying, "Lord, the one you love is sick." It is a perfect prayer. It doesn't demand, it doesn't manipulate, it doesn't offer a strategic plan. It just appeals directly to his affection. They cast their heavy burden entirely on his love. And then they wait. They sit by the bedside and they watch the road. Every time a shadow falls across the doorway, every time a footstep echoes in the courtyard, they think it must be him. But the sun sets, casting long, dark shadows across the room. The fever spikes higher. Lazarus' breathing becomes shallow, then ragged, and then it stops completely. Lazarus dies, and Jesus is nowhere to be found. They have to wash the body, they have to wrap him in burial cloths, they have to endure the cloying, heavy smell of burial spices, and the loud wailing of the professional mourners. They watch the heavy stone roll across the mouth of the tomb, sealing away their brother and their hope. In Psalm chapter 13, verses 1-2, David cries out from a place of profound spiritual exhaustion, asking how long the Lord will forget him, how long he will hide his face, and how long he must wrestle with sorrow in his heart. That is the exact, desperate cry that must have echoed off the stone walls of that house in Bethany. When you are standing in the middle of a burning crisis, divine silence feels exactly like divine abandonment. It feels like God looked at your emergency, evaluated your pain, and decided it just wasn't important enough to interrupt his schedule. You sit in the quiet aftermath of a shattered hope, wondering if the love you genuinely thought he had for you was just a cruel illusion. But what Mary and Martha could not possibly see from their limited vantage point of overwhelming grief was that their temporary timeline and God's eternal timeline were operating on two completely different planes of reality. This brings us to a specific detail in the biblical text that changes absolutely everything. A profound nuance in the original Greek that is so startling, so counterintuitive to our human understanding, that almost everyone reads right past it without a second glance. Notice the exact deliberate word order the Apostle John uses in chapter 11, verses 5 and 6. The text says that Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Did you catch that? Look closely at the connecting word between those two sentences. It doesn't say Jesus loved them, but he stayed away. It doesn't say he loved them, yet he was delayed by circumstances outside of his control. It says Jesus loved them, so he stayed away. The Greek word used here is aun, which translates directly to therefore or consequently. His delay was not a lapse in his love. His delay was not a sign of his indifference. His delay was the direct, deliberate, calculated result of his love. That is a staggering, almost offensive truth to swallow when you are the one doing the waiting. We are fundamentally wired to believe that love means immediate rescue. We think that if you truly love me, you will stop my pain right this second. You will pull me out of the fire the moment I cry out. But Jesus loved this family entirely too much to give them a temporary, ordinary healing, when he was already preparing to give them a breathtaking, history-altering resurrection. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 reminds us that we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. We quote that verse constantly, but we often misunderstand what good actually means. We think good means comfortable, easy, or painless. But sometimes, that divine good requires a painful delay that will temporarily break your heart. God is willing to endure your anger, your frustration, and your misunderstanding of his character in the short term, in order to reveal his ultimate miraculous glory to you in the long term. A healing would have just returned Lazarus to the fragile status quo. A resurrection expanded their entire understanding of who God was. He loved them, therefore he let them wait. But here is the deeply human reality. Acknowledging that God has a bigger, grander plan doesn't magically erase the sharp sting of the waiting, does it? Knowing that a resurrection might be coming doesn't make the tomb look any less dark today. The delay still hurts, profoundly. The empty chair at the dinner table still aches. The medical report still terrifies. The unanswered email still breeds suffocating anxiety. And this is exactly where the story of John chapter 11 offers its most profound, tender comfort. When Jesus finally arrives in Bethany 4 agonizing days late, he doesn't march into town with a dismissive, triumphant smile, telling everyone to dry their silly tears because he is about to perform a spectacular miracle. He knows exactly what he is about to do. He knows he is going to raise Lazarus in just a matter of minutes. He knows the explosive joy that is coming to that village. But when Mary falls at his feet, weeping bitterly, repeating the exact same accusation Martha had made, telling him that if he had been there, her brother would not have died, Jesus doesn't defend himself. He doesn't offer a theological lecture on the Greek word own. He doesn't bypass their current, raw pain just to get to the coming victory. John chapter 11 verse 35 gives us the shortest, yet arguably the most emotionally shattering verse in all of Scripture. It simply says, Jesus wept. The original language here is incredibly specific and deeply moving. The Greek word used for Mary's crying, and the crying of the mourners around her, is kleo, which means a loud, vocal wailing, a chaotic expression of grief. But the word used for Jesus' crying is dakrio, which means to shed tears silently. He stood there, looking at the absolute devastation his own intentional delay had caused the people he so deeply loved, and quiet tears streamed down his face. Psalm chapter 34 verse 18 tells us the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Jesus didn't just cause the waiting from a safe distance. He stepped directly into the dirt and the agony of it with them. He wept over the pain they had to endure to get to the miracle. This means that your tears in the waiting room are not a sign of your lack of faith, and God's silence is not a sign of his lack of empathy. He is a God who is sovereign enough to orchestrate the painful delay for your ultimate good, yet intimate and compassionate enough to sit in the dust and cry with you while you endure it. So how do you actually survive the days when God's calendar simply doesn't align with your emergency? How do you keep breathing when the delay feels like a death sentence to your dreams? Here are 3 specific, practical things you can do today. First, you have to consciously stop interpreting his delay as his total denial. Write down the words delayed, not forgotten, on a piece of paper, and tape it to your bathroom mirror where you will see it every single morning. Let that truth anchor your racing mind before the daily anxiety even has a chance to set in. Second, Give yourself full permission to grieve the waiting. Jesus didn't scold Mary for her bitter tears or her frustrated accusations, and he absolutely won't scold you for yours. Be brutally, transparently honest with him about how much the silence hurts. Pour out the anger and the exhaustion. Third, look for the quiet, sustaining grace in the current moment. While you are waiting in the dark for the heavy stone to be rolled away, actively look for the subtle ways he is holding you together right now. The friend who called at the exact right time, the unexpected moment of mental peace in the car, the very breath in your lungs. He is actively providing manna for you in the waiting room. Lord, the waiting feels so incredibly heavy right now. I feel exactly like Mary, standing outside a sealed tomb, staring at a dead dream, wondering why you didn't come when I called out to you. It hurts so deeply to watch the clock run out on the things I have prayed and fasted for. But I ask you to help me trust the therefore in my own messy story. Help me to truly believe that your delay is born out of a love that is so much deeper and wider than my limited understanding. Sit with me in my grief, weep with me in my confusion, and hold my heavy head above the rising waters until the day you finally call my miracle out of the grave. Give me the profound strength to simply stand here with you, trusting your heart even when I cannot trace your hand. Amen. Before you go, there's one more passage I want you to sit with tonight. I've put it on the screen right now. Stay with me and let these words wash over your weary spirit. If this blessed you, send it to someone who needs to hear it today.